Yeah, it's very important. I agree with that in the sense that, like, you mentioned the fact that we are still dealing with problems that used to happen like in the
In
early
1960s, yeah.
90s, yeah, and even the 1960s, yeah. So, I mean, even look across Africa, for example, right now, we're having like, I think it was just 2 days ago, there was a military coup that
Yeah,
happened in Guinea-Bissau.
yeah, sad.
Military coups, when you look at somewhere like Europe, those were issues that used to happen like 1960s, 1940s. You talk about Franco and all the likes. We're still having things like that happening in Africa today. So I think it brings me down to like the core of the conversation, right? Which is like what exactly is responsible for the the onslaught of underdevelopment. Basically, it's an
Mm.
onslaught. It looks like it's getting worse. I mean, you're saying places like Mozambique, Niger, Mali that are being conquered by even ISIS.
Mm.
Like primitive people that have extremely primitive ideas taking over those territories. I think it was Mali that ISIS are like literally holding them in a siege right now.
Yeah,
They can't access fuel, they can't access food in the capital
yeah.
because of ISIS. I mean, come on. So when you look at this sort of mirage of issues affecting Africa, poverty, war, religious extremism, diseases, so many things to talk about. But when you come to the crux of it, a lot of people say that maybe they are, or a lot of people fall into three different categories, right?
Mm.
Of what exactly may be the cause of the issue that's facing the black race or Africa as at the core of it, right? We are going to be focusing more on Africa because Africa is like seen as like the homeland for
Yeah,
the
the
black race,
motherland.
actually, like particularly sub-Saharan Africa, right? It's seen as like the motherland of the black race, particularly. So we limit the scope of the conversation to an extent around Africa, but they also talk about other places too. We can also talk about other places too, like the Caribbeans and the likes, right? But when it comes to the issue affecting Africa and the black race, some people, like I said, fall into three different camps. There is the area of or like the set of people that believe it is more of like a gene or how would I put it, like a
It's genetics.
natural, yeah,
Yeah.
like of the natural cause.
Biological.
Right. Yes, biological basically. Or they use the term eugenics, right? I don't want to dive into that. It's a term that has caused a lot of controversy, over the course of history and all of that. But they say like maybe there's a fundamental flaw in the
Mm.
makeup of black people generally that is causing this sort of like both individual underdevelopment and even collective underdevelopment like we see in the countries, right? And some other people fall into the camp of okay, maybe it's like a cultural issue.
Mm.
Maybe the cultures in Africa, right? The indigenous cultures are not just developed or rather set up in a way that enables maybe creative thinking, enables exploration, enables virtually ideas that help spark up development,
Mm.
right? Um, you know, I don't want to call it like genius nature per se, or basically like a culture that sparks up curiosity number one, and then also things that generally help to like promote awareness more, like an improved consciousness basically, and subsequently development.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. Where some people are divided across different camps. Some people speak about probably there's something in our nature we are doing. Talk about our culture, maybe our
Yeah,
practices and religious
beliefs.
cultures
Yeah.
and beliefs.
So yeah, that leads me to like the third point actually. So some of the opinion that a lot of the effects that we're seeing, or some of these things that we're seeing, they are a result of like a consequence of colonialism and even what we call modern day neo-colonialism, right? So you look at things like the transatlantic slave trade, things like even apart from the transatlantic slave trade, they also look at like the trans-Saharan slave trade as
Yeah.
well. A lot of these things left Africans destitute. There was the Arab conquest as well. Then we also had the proper colonialism where, Britain, Germany, and all those other people divided different groups of people, irrespective of their tribe. They just put them into one singular country, primarily for the purpose of like extracting resources, right? And so people have the camp that, this is what is primarily, leading to the current, underdevelopment of Africa and all of that. But then I like us to talk about these three factors, right? Maybe I don't know which one exactly do you lean into? Like maybe Senator, like which of these camps do you feel like is you feel like there's anyone that's like a primary cause, or do you feel like all three of them are involved? And then maybe the one could be like the primary cause or like an isolated. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I do not agree with the nature thing. I mean, as humans, we are savage, by nature, all of us. There is no society that became whatsoever thing it is today. It took years, and there are so many factors into play. All right. And so I don't think there is enough evidence to suggest that there is something innate
Yeah,
in human beings that will make them prosperous or otherwise. We've seen people across different race that were prosperous and some are not prosperous. So
yeah,
I don't think there is a correlation there
yeah,
or a causation. I mean, even it might say that, oh, there's a correlation between black countries and the other countries, and maybe there's more development, but doesn't mean like there's a causative factor
factor.
between them. And so that is one reason why I do not agree with it. Secondly, he actually he set a dangerous tone because the question you want to ask yourself is that what is the aim of saying that? All right. So, okay, let's grant for a minute that there is something wrong, fundamentally wrong in the biology of the the black people of Africans and
Yeah,
in their continent. Okay, what do you do next? Do you want to kill them? So it actually set a dangerous tone, and moreover, it's short of any attempt to even try to develop the country because you're already saying that no matter what you do, not going to be any
effects.
effect, any positive effect, because fundamentally you are not built to have that positive effect. And so, and I've tried to read a lot of scholarship. Obviously, there've been a lot of research done on this, a lot of papers that are actually available. The general academic consensus is to sort of ignore it for those reasons I've mentioned that it set a dangerous tone,
Yeah,
and it could be very dangerous too because then you're giving racists like an opportunity to do terrible things. They still
yeah,
talk about eugenics. You're giving people who believe in stuff like that actually,
White.
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, to actually have something to do with that. You do mention about culture, which I agree to, but I do not actually think that there is also something that is fundamentally wrong with the culture. I believe culture is shaped by many things, geography, time, as well. All right, because culture evolved with time as well. Okay, and I would give more credence to the impact of colonialism and slavery. Okay, I think Africa as a country and as a continent,
mm,
geographically and ecologically, doesn't have the advantage that some other continents have. You understand? I'm just going to give like just very simple example. Like what is the very first thing that humans started doing? Agriculture,
yeah.
right? Farming, livestock. Yeah, you're trying to domesticate wild animals. Look at the animals we have in Africa. How many of them can you potentially domesticate? Is it lions you want to start domesticating that are in the Sahara region? Of course not. So when you are in more temperate regions, they had like some of the animals there. I'm just giving a general example now where they might sort of domesticate. So you are able to have livestock, that kind of enterprise
Yeah,
could boom better than in a place like Africa that is not geographically placed. Even the ones that we could have, say cows and the cattle and all of those things, we are plagued with success fly that is also going to hinder the productivity and a lot of diseases
endemic.
that are endemic
Yeah,
to tropical regions. Talk about the people themselves. You have malaria and all of those things. Of course, they are not excuses. They have to be workaround. But the time you are going to use for the workaround to deal with those problems, you could have used that time to develop your area if the problem does not exist. Also, if you look at the continent in itself, there is this great, it spans along the north to south. All right, so
yeah,
there's this gap. When you look at Europe, for instance, this seems to be closed up together, and so I think it's easier. It will have been easier for them to meet, you understand, and do trade and exchange trade and move across. It's more horizontal than vertical, and there are no like thick desert or rainforest to prevent movement here and there.
yeah,
And so those obviously are like in there like some form of development, and obviously those geography also shape culture in itself because you want to be farmers within certain restrictions that you have, intercultural trade might not be a thing like that because how many other culture do you even have contact with? That kind of thing. The sort of transportation mechanism you would develop in just kind of restriction will be obviously different if you have like this free terrain. You can just move in between. So there are a lot of things that I believe that happened, and shaped the African culture. Even right now, you can just go ahead and say you want to marry anybody because we have things like genotype and all. And so you're already having restriction to the sort of things you can even do biologically that can actually help you as a society. And now I believe those shape our culture in terms of okay, what kind of trade do we do, what kind of government do we run. From the start, they might not be the best, of course, in terms of prosperity, but those are the things we could have worked with at the early days. And so, due to one of some of these things I've mentioned, I want to believe that Europe and some and Asia, Eurasia, for instance, let me just use that since they're almost together, it's a continuous land and mass, right? They had this, I would like to see some advantage in terms of development, all right? And so, due to that advantage, and obviously, they're able to build their military and all of those things, it was easier for them to come to Africa, during this transatlantic trade, even the sub-Saharan trade. And there is something very particular about this that we need to actually, we can't ignore. This thing went on for 400 years or more, like since the 16th century through up to like some aspect of the 18th century. This is an insane amount of time. If you take that out from development, that is a lot. Given what has happened in the past decade in the world, now imagine what 400 years can mean. And aside from that, that it's not just a stop to development, it's the extraction of people that can cause development. The slave trade basically extracted elegant young people, people that can work, able-bodied men and women that can actually contribute. They were extracted, leaving what do we have? The weak ones, technically,
So-called,
all
yeah.
right, or some strong ones. And what are the strong ones doing at that point? They formulate policies around extracting other people. Now you have colonialism. What did colonialism do? When the colonial masters were here, they did not come here to just rule and build this place to be conducive for them. They built it or they ruled it to pay them, like in terms of trade. So it was also extractive. So what is left from slave trade, you're coming more to sort of build things. So when you build rails, you build stuff, you're not building them because you're actually building infrastructure. You're building things to extract raw material to transport them back to your own place. And so you have a place that even the little you have that you can build from is still being extracted from. And what would that do to people that are being selected to lead those people? You start building a society that is extractive in nature, that is not actually working on the raw material you have to develop your place, but working on those material to still sell them, and which is what we have today. Even in terms of neo-colonialism, in the indirect sense, in places like Nigeria and other places where people develop themselves, learn, and then jack back, for instance, you're still extracting the best mind. In some African countries, some West African countries, you still have direct, what's it called? Direct relationship between the countries and the colonial master. When we had a little issue with the Togolese police on my way back from Ghana, and the police officer said, "I'm taking you to the French headquarters." He undenied, he stressed the French. I don't know whatever that means, making them understand that they are still under the direct control of French. 2025. That is insane. So, how do you expect that sort of society to build something really for its own people? There's still some influence, there's still some
Yeah.
extractive thing that will go in, whether or not they like it.
Yeah.
And so, those are like some of the bigger reasons I think Africa as a continent,
Yeah.
all right, and maybe even West African in particular is actually stunted when it comes to
So
growth and
yeah.
development, and nothing about gene, all of those things. I don't buy it.
Okay, I agree with you in the sense that yes, I believe that okay, maybe the primary cause may be um colonialism actually, like at least for this point in time. But then there's always this point of view that other people raise, which is that Africa is not the only continents that have been colonized. Nigeria, West African countries are not the only countries that have been colonized. We
Mm-hmm.
have a country like Singapore,
Mm-hmm.
for example,
Yeah.
right, which was heavily colonized as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the resources were extracted from them. We have some countries like India
Oh yeah.
as well, a huge landmass that
Yes.
was, under the British control for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You can call up to 10 of those countries, right, that have also suffered that. China was also colonized by Japan at some point in time in their history.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to go into
And
all this. And even in Europe as
we
well.
have places like Europe, Ethiopia that was not even colonized at all, and then
Yeah, anyway.
I get
All
that.
right. So they always bring up that point of view in the sense that there really is no excuse for Africa. If a country like Singapore as small as it is, as limited as its influence may have been in terms of the country,
Yeah.
in terms of being a small country, yet it was still able to pull its weight and become like a developmental hub for all
Yeah.
of the countries in the world.
Yeah.
So, what exactly would be the excuse of a country like Nigeria
Yeah. I
that
mean,
I have a
has
this.
point.
I
10 times
mean,
the
that's a very valid
10 times
point.
the population, have massive like Nigeria has like the 10th largest oil reserve in the world.
Yeah.
So what exactly is our excuse for still remaining 65 years plus after independence?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can we really bring up the excuse of colonialism again?
I don't think enough time has passed. And you mentioned the Colonialism. What I wanted to make was he came to Africa. I think I was telling Josh some days ago that when he came to Africa and figured out the way not to be an independent nation, he visited 17 African countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, and Tanzania. And then he had different lessons from each of them. So let me just highlight the three of them: Ghana, Nigeria, and Tanzania. So he came to Nigeria, met with Tafawa Balewa. And then one of the things that struck him was how Anglophile Tafawa Balewa was. And I was trying to sound like British.
Yeah,
He came to Lagos, he saw a lot of Washington was British like. They kind of felt like colonial masters were gone, but their
the
vestiges were
relics.
still
Yeah,
there. And it seemed like we were trying too hard
to
to
remain
be
like
like them. So in his mind, he was like, you can't just accept everything. There has to be some interrogation of some of the British practices.
principles.
Maybe try to like form your own sort of ideology
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
Why have all these countries gone down? They have taken power over from the British, the Dutch, the French, the Belgians, and look at the Congo. Look at Nigeria. 45 million people. They don't enjoy our standard of living. Vast natural resources. About 20 persons per square mile. Why? I've asked myself this often. Why? Because I must know the reason, otherwise I cannot fulfill my simple elementary function as a minister of the Singapore government.
And then he also spoke about the issue of tribalism, tribally as it relates to
yeah,
where in his mind he felt like we had stronger tribal sentiment than national cohesion
yeah.
and unity. And he said that was going to be a big problem. He
Did,
visited Nigeria.
did he propose any like solution? Any-
I'm going to get to
Alright.
that. So he visited Nigeria in 1966. That was the year of the. He came in January. And it's a very crazy point. He came to Nigeria. He was in Federal Palace Hotel. It was a heavy police presence. Because then we started having issues with
Mm.
riots in the southwest
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
north, and some pogroms against the Igbos. So it was in Nigeria in January. And then the same thing is still saw of some of the issues that people were telling you about are like, oh, the British put the political power in the hands of the northern
Elites.
Muslims, and then people in the south were, obviously were not happy about it. And so it already created like a chasm of conflict already between the north and the south. By the time he left, he got to Ghana. 3 days later, he had the coup. Papa Balewa was killed.
Imagine.
And then in his mind, he was like, this is
So
clearly not a
it's
way
yeah,
because we can't allow tribal sentiment to, um,
override
to override
national
national
cohesion.
cohesion.
And I tell you, there are many reasons. First, the will to be a nation. If a group of human beings do not want to together constitute a nation, nothing can make them other than superior force. That's what the Dutch and the British did with their empires, and the French. Whether you like the other chap or not, I say that you together constitute my colony, and you are all British subjects or French citizens or Dutch protected persons and so on. Now, each one of them have taken over. And a heterogeneous lot have taken over. And that variegated group must agree that they want to be a people. From the rest in the region, preserving our tolerant, permissive society, our own way of life, and very high standards. But to do that, you must have the will, the capacity to express your desire in an effective way. In other words, you must have leadership. There's no use saying, the Nigerian people believe so and so. Which Nigerian people? East Nigeria, West Nigeria, Midwest Nigeria, North Nigeria.
Then he got to Ghana, he met with Kwame Nkrumah, one of the leaders of Ghana's independence struggle. And then Kwame Nkrumah had bold ideas for industrialism. So they had the Akosombo Dam that they built, they had the Volta Dam, and then the Akosombo Dam was something he spoke in particular that led to some problems. It was this ambitious problem, so they borrowed a lot of money.
Mm.
So down the line, they started running into evidence at a very early stage. So it was very bold ideas, but they were not pragmatic. To sort of like fit the realities of that kind of like
And
increasing funds and all those kind of things. And then they decided to establish 64 national companies.
moving to socialism.
Yeah, almost socialism. And then there was funding problems too. There was mismanagement, there was corruption. So in Ghana, I started thinking about like corruption is going to be a big problem if, as a developing nation, you don't work on it, and then
Yeah.
you allow people to just do anything they want. When it got to Singapore, that was one of like cornerstone of his own government. Corruption was a no go
Heavily
there.
found on, yeah.
So like there was stiff punishment for corruption. Like everybody knew that if you are corrupt, though,
Yeah, out.
you're out. Then he went to Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, and then he made a comment about him that the man was a good Christian, quotes Bible, but he didn't understand economics. He was shit at economics. And what did Julius want? Julius wanted to build these agrarian communities where people were farming, and then the produce could be used for everybody.
Mm.
So you build schools in the community, have healthcare there. But then it was like when these people leave their houses, like who's going to take care of the house? Like they were trying to reject every form of capitalism. Trying to
Be
this
as communist as possible.
this idea of Pan-Africanism, let's go back to our roots. And then about 13 million people were moved to those sort of areas forcefully. Some people even died
Wow.
in the process of trying to build those communities. And they failed because they had these agricultural boards that would purchase the produce at very uncompetitive price because they're the only ones buying it. So there was no like, oh, this person is bidding, whatever price they set. So in the long run, people who were farming were not incentivized to produce better things. That's how they organized the community, the economy. And then they nationalized every country. So whether you're British or anything, it became Tanzania. And then started running into issues of proper management, issues of complexity, like how do you handle complexity, and just state capacity as well. And so he told the other line, a lot of African countries, especially when just giving they were trying to reject every Western idea, every Western ideology, with a lot of socialism, a lot of Pan-Africanism. And he went the other way around that he has to be pragmatic. You can't just throw away the baby with the bathwater. Like you have to pick things that would work based on your reality.
Many failures in the third world were the result of the leaders of the immediate post-independence period, the 1960s to the 80s, abiding by the theory then prevailing that socialism and state enterprises would hasten development. Their interventionist economic policies led to a misallocation of resources and increased opportunities for corruption. That theory was demolished as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union. There is no reason why third world leaders cannot succeed in achieving growth and development if they can maintain social order, educate their people, maintain peace with their neighbors, and gain the confidence of investors by upholding the rule of law.
You have to push for meritocracy. You have to build stronger institutions. One of the things we did was have this free market society where different companies would come and they knew that the government was going to support them. There's no one that's going to nationalize company in the long run. Because if you're nationalizing company, it means 2 4 years later, nobody's going to come to your country. Because in the example of Tanzania, by the time Julius was leaving, they were one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah.
Compared to when he became president. And he saw that. I was like, nah, like you cannot say, oh, we don't want capitalism, and then go all the way to the other side. Because even we see other countries like China who tried it, then end in disaster.
Yeah.
China to have this their farming policy as well, and then it led to famine when there was not enough food produced because there's humans work with incentives. Like there has to be something that incentivizes you. And if you remove all those kind of incentives and you want to build this utopia of a socialist country and there was like a planned economy, it doesn't always work. And that's like one of some of the lessons that he learned and
Okay.
was able to help Singapore.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
This is basically the Paris model of economics from his lessons in Africa.
Yeah.
But then, so okay, so basically, you agree with the point that we really cannot give colonialism as an excuse anymore.
Yeah, probably in the initial stage, it affected us.
Yeah, I mean, and
As you mentioned,
Mhm.
extracting resources, and some of the problems. I think you mentioned it as well, Josh, when you said about um, bringing people. Was it? I don't know if it was Senate that mentioned bringing different people,
Yeah,
different countries that probably do not have anything in common.
yeah.
For example, we have Nigeria where South, North, like there's not a lot of common between we and them.
Colonialism.
There's more commonality between like people on this side, people in Benin, for example. We have
Yeah,
a lot of Yoruba roots
traditions.
there, even Togo, even Ghana, like even now that sometimes I didn't even realize until recently, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that Ghana was not our neighbor.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
close.
There's
So,
there's Togo, there's
there's this
Benin,
meaning. But
there's
then it seems like
Ethiopia.
we are together. But then we are in the same country with we are
All that,
together with other people.
yeah.
There's not that lot of connection. And so that's one of the big issues. Like all these the artificial borders that colonialism
Great.
created, and then the disruption in our own economic development. Like you mentioned, as you said, 400 years is a long time. Who knows what we would have done during that period?
Yeah.
Some people just conclude that, oh, like, Africans don't have any sort of history, Africans don't have any sort of, like, development, but who knows what would have happened because everything was disrupted. So, yeah, I agree that colonialism played a part. But right now in 2025, we should have moved past
So what do you think is like the primary cause right now? Like,
yeah. Some of it was lack of pragmatism, especially from more ideologically inclined leaders in Africa. We had a lot of them. I mean, Kuma was a very ideological person. Julius Nyerere, Patrice Lumumba, they were very ideological, but the ideologies it affected their economic prowess.
yeah,
So I feel like they did not pay enough attention. So they had these lofty ideas of prosperity
yeah.
that did not materialize
I think
because they were not pragmatic.
many of them chose the wrong side, the wrong side of
Yes,
history.
because eventually most of them
Chose
ended up
socialism.
being
Socialism.
killed through in coup. Like a lot of them, not just Nigeria. Like when I started realizing that a lot of these other guys too, even from Nkrumah in Ghana, the same 1966 that we had our coup, they had a coup in Ghana as well, and people celebrated for you to know how
How
terrible
bad it was.
it was for them as
All
well.
right. So basically the pragmatism of African leaders is one you
Yes,
put as
at the beginning stage,
okay.
then mismanagement.
What about currently? Like,
Yeah,
is it just poor leadership that you itemize as like the primary reason for the black race being held?
I think so. For me, poor leadership.